They came for Daya at midnight, pounding on her door with the flat of a fist, and she was already awake. She'd heard the howling from across the compound, low and broken, the sound an animal makes when it has decided, quietly, that it is done. She'd been pulling on her coat before the knock. "It's Ruin," the guard said, breathing hard. Daya already knew. There was only one wolf in the Ironville pack who could produce a sound that sat in your chest like a stone. "How long has he been down?" "Since sundown. The pack healers have been with him for 4 hours. The guard hesitated. "Tell me." "They've stepped back. They said there's nothing to be done." Daya picked up her kit. "Take me to him." Ruin was the Alpha King's bonded companion, a black wolf the size of a small horse, older than most wolves live to be, with a scar running from his left ear to his jaw and eyes the amber color of old honey. He'd been Kale's companion since Kale was 12 years old. Everyone in the pack knew him. Most of the pack was afraid of him. Daya had been treating him for 3 years, quietly, out of the way, because the senior healers had made clear that an Omega animal healer was barely tolerated in proximity to the Alpha's companion. She'd treated Ruin's shoulder after a patrol injury, his paw after he'd caught it in a fence, an eye infection the previous winter. Each time she'd come and gone without ceremony, and Ruin had watched her with those amber eyes like he was deciding whether she was worth the trouble. She must have passed the test. He'd started coming to find her on his own. The stable yard was full of people when she arrived. Pack healers, 3 senior advisors, 2 guards, and Alpha King Kale, who was crouched beside Ruin in the straw with the wolf's massive head in his lap, one hand flat against the dark fur, not moving. He looked up when she came through the door. Daya had expected to be stopped. One of the senior healers, Bram, who was large and deeply committed to the idea that his opinion was the only relevant one, stepped directly into her path. "We've already assessed the situation," Bram said. "There's nothing to be done. The wolf is very old, sometimes." "Move," said a voice. It wasn't loud. It cut through the stable like a blade anyway. Kale was still crouched beside Ruin. He hadn't raised his head. But the one word was sufficient. Bram stepped to the side, and the space between Daya and the wolf opened like water parting. She crossed the stable, knelt in the straw beside Ruin, and set her kit down. "Hello, old man," she said softly. "I'm here." One amber eye opened and looked at her. His breathing was shallow and labored, each exhale a sound she didn't like. She worked quickly and methodically, beginning with what she could see and moving toward what she could only feel. Pulse, weak but present. Temperature, too high. She moved her hands across his torso, pressing gently, reading what the body said under her palms. She'd been doing this long enough that her hands had their own vocabulary. "What did the senior healers say?" she asked, not looking up. Kale answered. His voice was steady. It cost him something to make it steady. She could hear that, too. "Organ failure, age, nothing to be done." She pressed carefully along Ruin's flank and the wolf flinched, a small movement but specific. She pressed again. "Did anyone check for a puncture?" Silence. "The patrol route passes through the eastern thicket," she said. "Has anyone walked the path he came back on tonight?" More silence. She looked up at Kale. His eyes were on her hands. "There's something here," she said, "along the left ribs. A wound that closed over, not old within the last day. Possibly a spine from a dead tree, possibly a trapped thorn from the thicket brush. Small enough to miss on a surface check, deep enough to cause what you're seeing." Kale's jaw tightened. Bram said. "Bram didn't look," Daya said, and she kept her voice professional and without cruelty. "This isn't a failure of care, it's easy to miss. Ruin's coat is very thick and he doesn't give away pain easily." She glanced up at the wolf, who was watching her with both eyes now. "Do you?" "No, very stoic." She reached into her kit. "I need to clean and open the wound," she said. "The infection has spread, but the source is still there. If I remove it, clean the site, and treat the infection tonight, his body has a reasonable chance of doing the rest." "A reasonable chance," Kale repeated. She met his eyes. "I won't give you certainty I don't have. He's old and it's a significant infection, but right now he's losing a fight he could win if we change the conditions. That's worth attempting." Kale looked at her for a long moment, then he looked at Ruin. "Tell me what you need," he said. "Clear the stable. Except you, if you're able to stay calm, he'll want to hear your voice. And I need more light." The stable emptied, lanterns were brought, Daya worked. She talked while she worked to Ruin mostly, quiet and even. She narrated what she was doing the way she always did, not because the animal understood the words, but because the voice was a tether, a sound that said you are not alone in this, and I'm paying attention. Ruin's breathing stayed shallow, but it didn't get worse. Kale's hand never left the wolf's head. At one point he said, quietly enough that it might have been to himself, "He's been with me for 22 years. Daya didn't respond immediately. She focused on what she was doing. "I know," she said eventually. "I could tell the first time I treated him. The way he carries himself, he's never had to prove anything to anyone. That kind of confidence only comes from being well-loved for a very long time." Kale was quiet. His hand moved once across the wolf's ear. The work took 2 hours. By the end, Ruin's breathing had eased, not fully, not quickly, but she could hear the difference, the slight deepening that meant his body was recalibrating. She sat back on her heels and let out a breath. "Now we wait," she said. "He needs to rest, water when he'll take it, and I'll check him at dawn. The fever will need to break on its own." But she watched Ruin's chest rise and fall. "His color has improved." Kale looked at her. He had spent the last 2 hours in straw, holding his wolf's head, and he looked like a man who had been briefly very close to something terrible, and had been pulled back from it at the last possible step. "Thank you," he said. The words were plain and absolute without decoration. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me at dawn." "I'll thank you now," he said, "because what you just did was exceptional. You found what 4 trained healers overlooked." "I've been treating Ruin for 3 years," she said. "I know how he holds pain. I knew where to look." She began packing her kit. Anyone who knows their patients looks differently than someone meeting them for the first time in a crisis. "Why was no one told you've been treating him?" She looked up at him. He was watching her with an expression that suggested he already knew part of the answer, and was not pleased with it. "It was felt," she said carefully, "that an Omega animal healer's involvement with the Alpha's companion was," she chose her word, "irregular." "By whom?" "Bram primarily." Kale said nothing. The nothing was very loud. "Ruin kept coming to me," she said. "I couldn't exactly refuse. He's quite large and very determined." Something passed through Kale's expression, the ghost of something that might have been a smile gone before it fully formed. "He has excellent taste," Kale said. Daya looked at the wolf, who had closed his eyes but was breathing steadily now, his large frame settling into the straw with the slow relaxation of an animal that has decided it will, after all, remain in the world a while longer. "Stay with him," she said. "Your voice is doing as much as anything I've done. Don't underestimate it." She stood, her knees ached from the cold stone. Kale rose as well, and the height difference was considerable, but he was looking at her without any of the distance that rank usually installed in the space between an Alpha and an Omega. He was just looking at her, plainly, directly, like one person to another in a moment that had stripped everything else away. "At dawn," he said, "I'll be here." "So will I," Daya said. She picked up her kit. She was at the stable door when he spoke again. "His name," Kale said, "Ruin. People always ask why I named him that." She paused. "What do you tell them?" "That it's what I was afraid he'd do to me," Kale said quietly, "if I let myself care about him too much." Daya stood in the doorway for a moment, with the cold night air on her back and the warm, stable light ahead. "And did he," she asked, "ruin you?" Kale looked at the wolf sleeping in the straw. "Entirely," he said. "It turned out to be worth it." Daya walked out into the dark, and she was almost certain she was smiling.